What exactly happens if someone were to call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline? How do they try to help you? Are there other hotlines that are better? The first time I called, I still remember to this day. I was in between therapist appointments, and I was struggling really bad. I called and got connected to some guy, and he asked me what he could help me with. I guess I didn't think that far ahead, and after about 10 seconds I just kind of stuttered out, I don't know. And God, it must have just been the way he said it. But he just said, "What's going on, man?" like an old pal that was ready to help. I broke down and told him everything. He talked to me like I was an equal, something I really needed at that time. Once I felt better, and like I could get through my day, I thanked him for his time and the service he was providing. He had a few questions in there that I knew he had to ask. Was I planning anything? Was I in danger? Etc. But he sprinkled them throughout. We talked for about 25 minutes. A few days later I made a small donation to the hotline. They helped me, and I want them to be there to help others. 765-742-0244. This is a crisis suicide hotline that I used to volunteer with. They're much better than average hotline. When someone calls who is suicidal, the first thing that's done is a safety to determine if they're in danger at the moment or in the near future. 95% of suicide callers are not in danger when they call. In those cases they will gather information, empathize, and help you organize feelings that may be overwhelming you. After that you'll start moving towards solutions. A good hotline will not give advice or solutions. Instead, they will talk through solutions that you come up with. It's better to empower people to execute their own solutions than to give outside advice. Ultimately, though, the conversation is guided by you. If you just want to vent about suicidal feelings, you can. If you're feeling overwhelmed in a moment, you can just call and talk. If you have other questions, feel free to ask. Edit. OS, this really blew up in my sleep. I'll do my best to answer some things. I called the VA suicide hotline once. It rang once or twice and a woman picked up. We talked for at least 3 hours. She was amazing. She really actually cared, asked questions, sympathized with me. She saved my life. I got an emergency appointment with a VA therapist that next day. At least in my case, it worked the exact way it should. Did they book it for you? Or tell you how to seek the therapist? I've called once before when I was really upset about a friend's situation, I think, and just some hard-to-swallow circumstances in my life. I talked to a really nice woman who sounded like she was in her 30s to 40s, and she listened to me as I cried and hyperventilated a little. I explained my situation. She empathized with me, and eventually I think she asked what I like to do for fun or to feel better, and so we decided I'd watch a comedy special that night after I took a shower and just focus on me for a couple hours before I went to bed. At the very end of the call she made sure I didn't want to actively hurt myself or anything, and I felt a lot better. I wish I remembered her name, but she helped me a lot. Well, for the first minute as you sit crying in the dark, you listen to some pretty dope relaxing elevator music. Then they connect you to someone. You awkwardly try to stumble through your problem as they listen carefully. They give you some advice. The conversation goes back and forth, and then you go on your way. I always thought it would be some life-changing event when I called. Even though I logically knew nothing would happen, the back of my mind painted it as though time would stop. As though the police would show up 30 seconds after I called. As though everybody would know me as the one suicidal dude. As if I would be going through therapy and taking medication for years after the event. That's probably what stopped me from calling for so long. Anyways, I talked through my problems, hung up, and then went on with life. Even so, it felt great to get so much off my chest, and to know that one person out there knew my struggle. It all kinda got better from there. and all it took was talking. Kinda cliché but true. There's more specialized lines that are better if you have a more specific issue or that target a specific group. Otherwise, NSPH is as good a choice as any. In my personal experience, they have literally asked me, "Okay, are you going to kill yourself at this exact moment?" And me, of course, not wanting police to show up, say no. And then they've said, "Okay, well, goodbye, I have other calls to move on to." Edit. Wow, okay, I went to sleep after posting this. I didn't know so many people had the same experience I did. That's absolutely awful to hear that. It was really disheartening, and in addition it took me around 30, I kid you not, minutes to get someone on the line. I am in a better place now, and I hope all you are as well. Or can be at one soon. Exclamation mark. If anyone has any questions or just wants to chat, feel free to message me. You're not alone. I called while I was at work a couple months ago. I was cutting a lot and thought I cut really deep. I was talking with them for about 15 to 20 minutes when an ambulance and the cops showed up. What happened then? Think about the money we'd save not dispatching police immediately to things like this. Seeing these comments makes me really think about how hard finding mental health help is. It's truly saddening. In my experience, they basically at the threat level and why you're calling. I made it clear that I wasn't going to kill myself and had no gun, knives, pills, etc. From what I understand, if I told them I was sitting with a gun or something like that, they might have tried to send help. But because I was just really depressed and my main issue was substance abuse, they did not do so. They talked for a few minutes, offered some potential resources, and then wanted to end the phone call so they could respond to more calls, which I understood. I wasn't suicidal all the way. Just wasted again and really didn't want to keep on going through the motions of trying to keep it together all day to earn a small amount of money. Keeping appearances, dabbing withdrawal sweats and covering shakes, just to get home and have that 1 hour window of feeling alright, and then getting drunker and drunker until I would wake up all over again. Usually embarrassed about a phone call or text I made at 2 a.m., either still drunk or shaky, just wanting to hide from everything. If you're struggling with substance abuse, a good hotline to call is your local AA intergroup or even a random one. While AA isn't perfect, they 100% are never trying to sell anything. Most other substance abuse lines or rehab telemarketing farms that really want your money, or they want your insurance payout. AA, at the very least, is just about people and interactions. And they never want your money. You can meet some incredible people or some jerks. Just like anywhere else. They listened to me for a while, gave me some advice or told me what they did, and found some meetings for me to go to the next day. Overall, they were much more willing to talk it out rather than try to intervene with immediate or get me into a facility, which is exactly what I needed at that time. Just a person to talk to and get the words, "I wanna be sober," out into the universe. Just hit a year sober last week. Edit. There's nothing wrong with rehab. I went to rehab twice. I loved it. AMA about rehab. I just meant at your lowest moment, intoxicated, it would be better to just talk to someone who isn't financially motivated to get you into rehab. And well, since I already made the album, here's some progress pics. The only time I used it was the chat feature. I hate talking on the phone, but I'm gonna be honest and say it was a bad experience for me. I was really upset because I found my now ex-BF in bed with his ex and I was in a bad mental state over that. Like really bad. I hadn't been suicidal since I was a wee teen, but finding my BF in bed with someone else made me feel all of those suicidal feelings again. I had to wait for like an hour to connect with someone. And then the person was just like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And then when I tried to explain further, the person was just like, "Oh, there, honey, you'll be fine." Somebody talks to you. They also have a chat box. Or they hang up and tell you sleep it off. Really a roll of the dice with them. Called once when I was at my lowest. Got asked if I'm in immediate danger to myself right off the bat. I was so off balance that I just said no, and then they hung up on me. Pissed me off so much that I didn't go through with it. Guess it worked. Survival of the spiteful. I'm glad it worked and I hope you're alright now. Task failed successfully. You get a message saying no one is available to talk to you. Try again later. And then you sit alone and cry in a parking garage and wonder if it's a sign you should go through with it. Memorial Day 2018. I was in the wait line for 40 minutes before they ended up disconnecting me. I had tried to call the day before, but hung up after 20 minutes of waiting. Ended up going through with it only to have my parents find me skeptical smiley face. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That F sucks. You want help? Well, on one side you have those on the hotline that genuinely want to help people, and they will listen and suggest things as the conversation develops. On the other hand, you have people who just think you are a menace to society on the hotline, and they will basically ignore you, then call the police to your home the second you say you are suicidal. Which just makes things worse 9 times out of 10. It really is a coin flip sometimes. As for the last part of your question, there is no other hotline that I know of that is willing to talk with those who are suicidal. Most mental health services will refer you to the hotline if you say you are suicidal. The guy asks some questions. Eventually asks, "How old are you?" You say you're 16. And you hear the eye roll in the tone of his voice when he tells you to contact your healthcare provider. And then he hangs up on you. The second time you call, a year and a half later, and the police show up at your house and tell you that you either come with them willingly or they will force you outside. Then you take a trip in the wee-woo wagon where you have a short, awkward conversation with the EMT about Hot Pockets and avoid eye contact, regretting your decisions up to that point. And after that, you sit in the for 3 hours. Until your parents come to collect you. Some social worker will come in to ask questions and try not to sound exhausted. Before you finally get to go home and wonder if you would have been better off dead anyway. Later, you get the medical bill that your parents are still paying off years later and still resent you for. So all in all, my experience wasn't as bad as others. I called once. Actually, someone called for me. I was having a bit of a breakdown. I wasn't screaming or flying off the handle. I was just venting and I needed someone. Instead of talking me through it, my ex dialed the number on his cell phone, handed it to me, and then went to bed. A man answered. He sounded like I disturbed him from something he would rather be doing. I just wanted to vent and I was crying, but not hysterical. I asked him what I should do. I wanted some direction or some comfort and for someone to tell me that it would be okay. He told me to call an ambulance and that was the only advice he said he felt he could give. Totally let down. Went to bed defeated. If you're not an empathetic person, please don't volunteer to do this stuff. They didn't help me at all. They honestly seemed to giggle sporadically throughout my phone call. That's incredibly unfortunate. I'm sorry. Holy see. That's horrible. I hope you're in a better place now. I answered this hotline for a few years, so I'll try to answer as much as I remember. Here's some quick background. The vast majority of the people that answer the line are volunteers. I went through Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, ASIST. That lasts a weekend and then I had about 80 hours of training offered by the center where I volunteered. Then, they let you listen to an experienced volunteer a few times and then you start taking calls yourself. The first few shifts an experienced volunteer listens to your calls and advised you. After that, you answer the phone on your own. However, my center did require 2 additional training per year. When you call the national number, you are routed to the closest hotline. If the closest hotline doesn't answer, you are supposed to be routed to the nearest hotline after that. For example, if you're in Los Angeles but the Los Angeles center doesn't pick up, then you may be routed to the San Diego center. From what I understand, exactly what happens depends on the training of the volunteer. I mostly gave people a caring, empathetic ear and helped connect them to resources in the area. I was able to access the 211 database at my center. I would ask them their demographics, situation, groups they belong to, low income, veteran, LGBT+, women, people of color, foster youth, etc., and see if there were specific groups that were available to help them. I'd talk to them about their reasons for suicide and work on trying to find ways to keep them safe. I'd like to think that I helped some of the people that I spoke to. Are there other hotlines that are better? I feel like that's a bit hard to say. If you're dealing with a specific issue that has a hotline with it, you may want to try calling the issue-specific hotline as well. They may be better trained on that topic. For example, if an individual is struggling with their sexuality, they may want to reach out to a LGBT+ specific hotline. The National Suicide Hotline basically links local hotlines. If someone from the other side of the U.S. called me, I was limited on the resources that I could offer. Arguably, that could make me less effective than someone that is closer to the caller that has more local resources to offer. As a counterpoint to that, my center required in-service training, and I've heard that many other centers don't require that. Arguably, I may have been more effective as I received frequent training. The quality of the help you receive really depends on the center and the volunteer. I am going to copy-paste what I previously wrote in a different thread. Call 211 instead. The suicide hotline was a bunch of unempathetic individuals who were completely detached from the situation at hand. This was my exchange with them. Do you want us to call an ambulance and get police involved? No? Okay. Well, call us back if you feel like you need to. No help or alternative than to send cops to drag you out without listening to a word you say. A warning to everyone. Never ever get the police involved. I have only heard horrible stories that turned a scary situation into one that is 1,000 times worse. Mentally, 211 was amazing. I told them my situation and that I needed help but was overwhelmed and didn't know where to start. My brain was a mess and I could not even think straight. They asked me if they could contact places on my behalf for an inpatient program. I said yes, and within minutes they had left messages for several clinics and had gotten the answer from several hospitals in the surrounding cities. Between every action they did, they reconnected to me and updated me and told me what they were doing next. So it was not like I was on hold for several minutes either, as my mind was racing. They coordinated everything and even did follow-up calls to me 3 days later and a week later to ask how I was doing. The person was super helpful. I hope I never experience anything like that again in my life. But if it does, I feel like I could put my life and well-being in their hands. All our operators are busy at the moment. Please listen to this calming and uplifting music. Don't hang up and don't hang yourself. Edit corrected the tense. Hung is the past tense. Also, this is extracted and translated from a Les Luthier's sketch about a suicide hotline in Spanish. They just have to say "don't hung up," and both are already implied. I called for a loved one once and I was on hold for 40 minutes before I gave up. Thankfully, they're doing better now.